Child marriage is a major focus of global dialogue these days, including in Ethiopia. The government is making huge effort to reduce the numbers of early child and forced marriage throughout the country.
Early marriage is still very prevalent, though it has been declining, and the average age of marriage is still well below the legal age of 18. So it is clearly a very pressing issue.
What we find in Young Lives is that child marriage needs to be seen within the context of children's longer-term trajectories. What the qualitative research can do is to dig down into those individual stories and those individual lives. And really connecting those two creates a very powerful story for policy. We have very interesting cases in Young Lives, and we'll share some of those with you. We'll give the example of 4 girls growing up in the same community and born in the same year, 1994. We started following them from the age of 12, and we followed them till they were around 19, 20 years old, and continue to have contact with them through our research activities. So what we ask is, what were those factors that influenced their trajectories, and how do we explain their different outcomes at the age of 19?
My name is Susan. I'm 19. I live with my husband and my daughter, who is 2. I went to school until I was 14, but then I dropped out. I wanted to stop so I could help my mother. There was a drought and we were short of food for the family, so I wanted to find paid work. I have known my husband since I was small, but then when we met at the crusher factory, we started to be boyfriend and girlfriend. It was his idea to get married. I was happy about that because that was what I wanted. Now I look after my child and my husband and run my household.
When I was younger, my hope was to attend university and get a job. But I didn't pass the 10th grade examination, so I lost all hope for education. I'm glad I made it to the 10th grade at least, because if I had dropped out earlier, say in the 3rd or 4th grade, maybe they would have made me get married, and that would have ruined me as a child.
Much of the focus is on keeping girls enrolled in school longer, with the assumption that if they stay in school, they won't get married. But we know that that's a very difficult and complex relationship. In Young Lives, we find that many of the girls, in fact, had left school, particularly for reasons related to poverty, because they had to work outside the home to help their families in difficult situations. And it was only then that they married young. Very few of the girls had actually left school in order to get married.
If the opportunities for work and migration are restricted, and if you're not very successful with schooling, and even if you are, the jobs are quite restricted, what do young girls do? Well, the traditional route is to get married, and many girls still have to do that or choose to do that.
I was 15 when I married. He was 21. I imagined I would be 20 or 25 when I got married. But my mother was worried that no one would marry me because we are poor and couldn't afford the dowry. She was planning to work and save money for a dowry, but was too ill. When the elders came to our house to make the proposal, she told me I should accept since they weren't asking for a dowry. My cousins told me not to marry. They said, "You are small, do not get married." But I didn't want to disobey my mother, so I accept.
For some families, it's about securing their daughter's best future. It might be about strengthening alliances between families, making sure that certain assets like land or property are passed on appropriately. Marrying a girl can be about ensuring her honor and the honor of her family. One of the challenges nowadays for girls and families is that they're negotiating multiple messages out there. So across the study, in all rural and urban sites, families have very high aspirations for their children, boys and girls, and schooling plays such a central part of that. Yet, marriage and becoming a mother or becoming a father remain really important life goals for young people and for families.
What we're beginning to see is it's very different whether you get married as a 13-year-old or a 15-year-old or a 17-year-old. And children's agency becomes more important as they grow up.
What we find with the girls who marry younger is that they are particularly vulnerable. There tends to be a greater age difference with their spouses. They're much less likely to have known their spouse before the day of the wedding. They tend to come from much poorer households. Older girls in our sample of participants tend to be marrying peers as opposed to men that they didn't know ahead of time. And the older they are, the more choice they tend to have in whether or not they want to marry.
I have no boyfriend yet. Someone asked me, but I turned him down. I think 25 or 26 is a good age to marry.
What it's shown us is to think about marriage in terms of pathways, but not only pathways to marriage, but also pathways to, through, and from marriage. So Hamina, for example, when we first visited her, she was in school. Later, she had left school and was working. Then we return and she's married and she has a young daughter. By the next visit, she was divorced. And then by 2015, she had remarried and had another child. Much of the focus in policy and in programming is about delaying child marriage. It's focused around early marriage. It's about preventing girls in particular from marrying before the age of 18. But what we know is that girls and boys are marrying. Adolescents are forming relationships. And so a very important question and a focus for policy should be around how to support young married girls and how to support couples.
Some of our findings would suggest that focusing less narrowly on marriage but looking more at the opportunities and improving the prospects in terms of education and training, jobs, will mean that they don't take the kinds of decisions that will have detrimental effects on their life chances.
Looking forward, the policy world is very much concerned with reducing inequalities. And Young Lives is very much part of that effort by providing real-life evidence to those who can make a difference. And importantly, evidence that's generated directly with the children and families who are to be affected and whose lives are to be improved through those policies.